Welcome to Curtain Call Memories. I'm George. Today, we gather to remember the lives that once took center stage and left a lasting impression on hearts everywhere. Through their art and dedication, they gave us moments we will always cherish. As we look back, we honor their memory and the stories they leave behind. Phil Garner, widely remembered by his nickname, Scrap Iron, was the kind of baseball figure whose reputation was built on grit, effort, and unwavering competitiveness. He passed away at the age of 76 after a long battle with pancreatic cancer, leaving behind a legacy that stretched across decades as both a player and a manager in Major League Baseball. Born on April 30, 1949, in Jefferson City, he grew up in a working-class environment that shaped his disciplined and hard-working approach to the game. At the University of Tennessee, he developed into a reliable infielder with strong instincts and a determined mindset that carried him into professional baseball. Making his MLB debut in 1973 with the Oakland Athletics, he went on to play for several teams, most notably the Pittsburgh Pirates, where he played a key role in their 1979 World Series championship run. Known for his consistency and leadership, he later transitioned into managing, guiding teams such as the Houston Astros, and leading them to their first World Series appearance in 2005. Garner's legacy is defined not just by statistics, but by toughness, leadership, and a relentless spirit that inspired teammates and fans alike. The entertainment world is reflecting on the loss of Nicholas Brendon, widely recognized for his role as Xander Harris in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He passed away in his sleep at the age of 54 from natural causes, leaving behind a body of work that continues to hold a special place in the memories of fans. For many viewers, his character was more than just comic relief. Xander represented loyalty, vulnerability, and emotional honesty within a supernatural world, helping ground the series' deeper themes of friendship and growing up. His performance added warmth and relatability to a show that became a defining part of television culture. Beyond his most famous role, Brendon also appeared in series such as Criminal Minds and Kitchen Confidential, where he demonstrated versatility across different tones and characters. Whether in lighter moments or more serious storylines, he was often appreciated for the natural quality he brought to his performances, making his characters feel approachable and real. Those who worked with him, and those who followed his career, remember him for that sincerity on screen. His passing marks the end of a personal journey, but his work continues to remain present through the characters he brought to life and the audience connection he built over the years. Monte Coleman is remembered as a figure of steady excellence in football, whose life reflected discipline, humility, and long-term dedication to the game. Passing at the age of 68, he leaves behind a legacy shaped less by spotlight moments and more by years of consistent effort and leadership both on and off the field. Born in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, on November 4, 1957, he grew up in an environment where resilience mattered, and he developed early into a focused and dependable athlete at Pine Bluff High School. Rather than relying on flash, he built his reputation on reliability and hard work. He continued his football journey at the University of Central Arkansas, where his intelligence and tackling strength earned attention despite limited exposure from major programs. Selected in the 1979 NFL Draft by the Washington Redskins, he went on to spend his entire 16-season professional career with the franchise. Known for toughness, awareness, and consistency, he became a trusted presence during a successful era for the team, contributing quietly but meaningfully to its achievements. After retiring, Coleman transitioned into coaching at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, where he guided young athletes with patience and respect. His legacy endures through the players he mentored and the example of steady professionalism he consistently demonstrated. Lilius Foland passed away at the age of 90 at an assisted living facility in Loveland, Ohio. leaving behind a quiet but meaningful legacy, shaped by care, patience, and gentle teaching. She was widely cherished as a yoga instructor who helped bring the practice into many American homes at a time when it was still unfamiliar to much of the public. Through her television program, Lila's Yoga and You, which began in 1970 and continued for nearly 3 decades, she offered a calm and approachable introduction to movement, breath, and mindfulness. Her presence on screen felt steady and reassuring, as if guiding viewers through each session with a sense of personal attention and ease. Rather than focusing on intensity or performance, she emphasized accessibility and comfort, encouraging people of all ages and abilities to participate at their own pace. Many who followed her program recall it as part of their daily rhythm, something that brought structure, relaxation, and emotional balance into ordinary routines. Her teaching style was marked by softness and clarity, making wellness feel less like a challenge and more like a simple return to self. Today, she is remembered not only as an instructor, but as someone who quietly shaped how generations understood self-care, bringing a sense of calm into homes and lives through consistency, warmth, and presence. 5 years ago this week, the world quietly lost Jessica Walter at the age of 80, an actress whose screen presence carried both authority and an unexpected softness. She first drew widespread attention with her powerful turn in Play Misty for Me, a performance that continues to resonate with viewers even today for its intensity and emotional grip. Over time, she became a familiar and beloved figure in television, especially remembered for her role as Lucille Bluth in Arrested Development. With razor-sharp dialogue and impeccable timing, she turned sarcasm into an art form, delivering every line with a cool confidence that made the character unforgettable. In her later career, she reached an entirely new audience through voice acting, most notably as Mallory Archer in Archer. Her performance proved that true talent doesn't fade with time, it adapts, deepens, and finds new ways to shine. Even without appearing on screen, her voice alone carried authority, humor, and unmistakable personality. Jessica Walter had a rare ability to shape every character she touched, giving them depth, intelligence, and lasting charm. Her work continues to live on through her performances, which still feel sharp, relevant, and full of life. The story of Sam Elliott begins not with fame, but with absence, a kind of silence that shaped everything he would later become. Long before audiences recognized the deep, unhurried voice that would define American cinema, there was only a boy growing up in ordinary spaces that felt quietly distant. In that distance, something was forming, not loudly or quickly, but like pressure gathering beneath stone. He would later be known for characters who seemed carved from patience itself, men who spoke little but carried weight in every word. Yet none of that was visible at the beginning. What existed instead was a child learning to interpret a world that did not always reflect him back clearly. His father's restraint, his mother's steady warmth, and the subtle tension between them created a home that was stable but emotionally muted. From that muted environment, imagination became a kind of refuge. Film and landscape offered what daily life did not. Even then, something in him responded to stories of open land, of quiet strength, of men who endured rather than announced themselves. Those early impressions would eventually become destiny in disguise, waiting for time to reveal their shape in quiet, steady motion. Sacramento roots and Portland rain. The early years of Sam Elliott's life unfolded between two very different American landscapes, each leaving its own imprint on his developing sense of self. Sacramento offered structure and the quiet order of post-war suburban life, while Portland introduced him to a moodier world shaped by rain, distance, and introspection. These shifts were not dramatic events in a young boy's eyes, but they accumulated slowly, shaping how he observed people and places. His father worked in government service, a profession rooted in duty and consistency, and his mother provided emotional balance within the household. Together they created a home that functioned well but spoke softly in emotional terms. As the family moved north, the sense of belonging became less certain, and the young Sam began to find comfort in environments that did not demand explanation. Forest trails, open fields, and the quiet margins of the city became spaces where he could simply exist without expectation. In those places, he began to understand silence not as emptiness, but as presence. That understanding would later define the way he carried himself on screen, long before anyone recognized the significance of the man he was becoming. Even in childhood, he was drawn to stories where men communicated more through presence than speech entirely. A father's conviction and a son's calling. At the heart of Sam Elliott's early struggle was a quiet but persistent conflict between inherited expectation and personal calling. His father represented a worldview grounded in practicality, where success meant stability, measurable progress, and a clear occupational identity. In contrast, Sam found himself drawn towards something intangible, a form of expression that could not be easily explained or justified in traditional terms. The tension between these perspectives was not explosive but enduring, shaping the atmosphere of every conversation about his future. When he expressed interest in acting during his university years, it was not received as rebellion, but as misunderstanding from his father's point of view. To Henry Elliott, performance was not a foundation for a life, it was a risk without structure. Yet for Sam, it felt like recognition of something internal that had no other outlet. He transferred schools, worked temporary jobs, and attempted to balance obligation with desire, but the pull toward performance remained constant. Each compromise only clarified the direction he was meant to follow. What emerged from this period was not resolution, but clarity, a growing certainty that he would have to choose a path without guaranteed approval or support, and accept consequences thereof. Hollywood's long waiting room. Arriving in Los Angeles in the mid-1960s, Sam Elliott entered an industry that was both vast and indifferent, a place where ambition was common and recognition was rare. He did not fit the immediate expectations of casting directors, nor did he conform to the emerging archetypes of the era. His presence was too grounded, too self-contained, and too resistant to exaggeration. As a result, his early years in Hollywood were defined by persistence rather than breakthrough. He took whatever work he could find, from commercials to minor television roles, each one serving as both survival and training. The Chevron commercial that gave him one of his earliest screen appearances did not change his life overnight, but it affirmed that the door was not entirely closed. He worked additional jobs to sustain himself, navigating the gap between artistic ambition and financial necessity. In casting rooms, he was often remembered but rarely selected, a familiar face without a defining role. Yet even in this uncertainty, he continued to refine his craft, learning to rely on stillness, voice, and presence, rather than excess. Over time, these qualities became his signature, though recognition of them arrived far later than expected by industry. The absence that arrived too soon. The death of Sam Elliott's father in 1970 marked a turning point that carried more emotional weight than any professional milestone of that period. It arrived at a time when his career was still forming, when recognition was minimal, and uncertainty defined most of his professional life. The loss did not come with resolution or dramatic closure, but with absence that deepened every unresolved conversation from the past. For Sam, it meant that the approval he had once hoped to earn would never arrive in the form he had imagined. Yet the absence also solidified something within him, a quiet determination to continue, regardless of external validation. In Hollywood, where momentum is often tied to visibility, he remained largely on the edges, moving through television roles and minor film appearances without breaking into full recognition. The experience of grief became intertwined with persistence, shaping the tone of his performances and the restraint he brought to every character. What he lost in personal affirmation, he began to express through emotional depth on screen, channeling unspoken feeling into roles that required presence more than dialogue. In time, absence became part of his foundation, not weakness, but a quiet source of endurance there. Television years and almost fame. Throughout the 1970s, Sam Elliott moved steadily through the landscape of American television, becoming a familiar but not yet fully recognized presence in households across the country. His appearances in series such as Gunsmoke, Mission Impossible, and The FBI created a body of work defined more by consistency than by headline recognition. He was the actor viewers had seen before but often struggled to place, a face that lingered without immediate association. This period was defined by repetition and patience, each role contributing incrementally to a reputation that had not yet crystallized. While others around him experienced faster rises or sharper declines, his trajectory remained steady, shaped by reliability rather than volatility. The industry understood his capability, yet struggled to assign him a defining category within its evolving expectations. Even when he appeared in films such as Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid, his presence remained subtle, absorbed into larger ensembles. The word that best described his career during these years was almost. Almost recognized, almost cast, almost elevated to the level of breakthrough. Yet, this near visibility became its own form of endurance, preparing him for the moment when recognition would finally align with presence at last fully realized. Lifeguard, and the first leading role. In 1976, Sam Elliott's career reached a subtle but important turning point with the release of Lifeguard, a film that gave him his first leading role. The character he portrayed, Rick Carlson, was a man caught between youthful expectation and the quiet realization of time passing more quickly than anticipated. The role did not transform him into a household name, but it demonstrated to the industry that he could carry a narrative as its central figure. For years, he had existed on the edges of stories, contributing presence without ownership of the spotlight. Lifeguard shifted that dynamic, even if only briefly, by placing him at the emotional center of a film. The performance revealed qualities that would later define his career, including restraint, emotional depth, and an understated intensity that did not rely on theatrical expression. Although the film remained modest in commercial impact, it marked a moment of recognition among those paying close attention. It confirmed that his long years of persistence had not been misplaced, even if the rewards were still slow to arrive. In hindsight, Lifeguard can be seen as a quiet rehearsal for the larger roles that would eventually establish his legacy in American cinema forever. Catherine Ross and A Quiet Beginning. Sam Elliott's connection with Catherine Ross began in an environment where both were already navigating the demands of Hollywood, though at very different stages of recognition. Their first meeting occurred during the production of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, where their interaction was brief and shaped by circumstance rather than intention. At the time, there was no suggestion of the relationship that would eventually form between them, only a passing encounter between two professionals working within the same industry. Years later, fate brought them together again on the set of The Legacy, where familiarity slowly gave way to something deeper. Their relationship developed without urgency, marked by patience and a mutual understanding of the lives they had already lived. Catherine Ross brought with her an established career and public recognition, while Sam Elliott was still navigating the uncertain terrain of long-term persistence in acting. Despite this difference, their connection was not defined by status, but by recognition of shared values and temperament. What emerged was not a sudden romance, but a gradual alignment, one that resisted the typical pressures of Hollywood relationships. Over time, their bond became steady, offering balance against the unpredictability of Hollywood life it endured. Marriage, family, and a new center. The marriage between Sam Elliott and Catherine Ross in 1984 marked a turning point in both of their personal lives, bringing together two established actors who had already experienced the complexities of Hollywood careers. Their union was not presented as spectacle, but as a private commitment that reflected their shared preference for privacy over publicity. That same year, the birth of their daughter, Cleo Rose Elliott, added a new dimension to their lives, shifting their focus from individual ambition to family responsibility. For Sam, fatherhood represented a form of grounding that contrasted sharply with the uncertainty of his earlier years in the industry. The demands of parenting and partnership introduced a stability that allowed him to approach his career with a different perspective. While he continued to work steadily in film and television, the center of his life was no longer defined by professional pursuit alone. Instead, it was anchored in the relationships that gave his life continuity and meaning. This period also reinforced the balance between public recognition and private life, a balance that both he and Catherine valued deeply. Together they created a household that remained intentionally removed from the pressures of Hollywood visibility, quietly enduring ever since. Breakthrough roles and cultural recognition. The late 1980s and early 1990s marked the long-awaited shift in Sam Elliott's career, when years of steady work finally began to translate into widespread cultural recognition. His role as Wade Garrett in Roadhouse introduced him to a broader audience that had previously only encountered him in smaller or supporting capacities. The performance carried a combination of authority and ease, presenting a character who seemed fully formed from experience rather than constructed for effect. This was followed by his role in Tombstone, where he portrayed Virgil Earp with a restraint that grounded the film's larger-than-life narrative. In both performances, he demonstrated an ability to command attention without dominating the screen, allowing presence itself to become his defining characteristic. These roles did not create his identity, but they clarified it for audiences who had not yet understood the consistency of his earlier work. Recognition arrived gradually, not as a sudden transformation, but as an accumulation of visibility that had been building for decades. By this point, the industry could no longer overlook the distinct quality of his work, and audiences began to associate his voice and presence with a specific kind of cinematic authority that felt timeless, unmistakable.